Have you ever done everything right, stayed loyal, kept your word, worked harder than anyone in the room, and watched someone who did none of those things win anyway? Not just win, thrive. And in that moment, if you're brutally honest with yourself, a quiet, deeply uncomfortable question surfaces. What if I've been playing by the wrong rules? Not wrong in a moral sense. Wrong in the sense that they were never the rules the world actually runs on. That collision between the world as we're told it works and the world as it actually does. That's where one of history's most dangerous thinkers made his home. Understanding him won't make you a villain. It will make you something far more threatening. Someone who sees clearly. Niccolò Machiavelli was born in Florence, Italy, in 1469. And Florence, despite what the paintings tell you, was not a city of beauty and Renaissance wonder. It was a laboratory. A living, breathing experiment in political violence, sudden betrayal, and the raw mechanics of who rises and who gets destroyed. Machiavelli wasn't a warlord. He wasn't a tyrant. He was a diplomat and civil servant who spent 14 years watching power at extremely close range. He watched alliances form and collapse overnight. He watched virtuous men lose everything while ruthless men endured. He watched good intentions get swallowed whole by people who had none. And he took notes. Then in 1513, everything was taken from him. The Medici family returned to power. Machiavelli was suspected of conspiracy. He was arrested, tortured, and exiled to a small farm outside Florence, stripped of his career, his influence, his entire identity. So he did what men do when everything is gone and there's nothing left to lose. He wrote the truth. The result was his book called The Prince. A short, brutal, unsparing document addressed, with breathtaking audacity, to the very man who had destroyed his life. It wasn't philosophy. It wasn't theory. It wasn't a thought experiment written from comfort. It was a map, drawn by a man who had watched idealism fail in real time, who had been chewed up by the machinery of power, and who survived to document, with surgical precision, exactly why. He wasn't describing the world he wanted. He was mapping the world as he found it. His name became an adjective, synonymous with manipulation, cold calculation, moral emptiness. But here's what that dismissal actually does. It lets you file him away, label him evil, close the book without sitting with what he actually said. And what he said was largely correct. Not about what should be, about what is. And that single distinction is the most unsettling thing you may hear today, because it means the problem was never Machiavelli. The problem is that he described you, the world you live in, the people around you, and the rules they're already playing by, whether you acknowledge them or not. Let's talk about fear. Not the fear you feel in a dark alley. Not the fear with a racing heart and sweating palms. The quieter kind. The kind with no name. The fear that makes you hesitate before speaking in a meeting. The fear that rewrites your message 4 times before you send it. The fear that keeps you in a conversation you should have ended, a job you should have left, a dynamic you should have confronted months ago. That fear. Here's the dark truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. When you fear someone, they don't need to do anything to control you. You do it for them. Willingly. Automatically. Every single day. You reshape your words around their reaction. You reshape your choices around their mood. You reshape your around what they might think of you. That is not caution. That is not emotional intelligence. That is not keeping the peace. That is servitude. And the cage, every bar of it, was built by your own hand. Here's what makes it darker. Most people who are controlled by fear have convinced themselves they're being mature. The bigger person. They've dressed up their surrender in the language of wisdom. But the body knows. The stomach knows. The sleepless 3 in the morning knows. You see it everywhere once you understand what you're actually looking at. The person who laughs at a joke that offended them. The employee who enthusiastically agrees with a decision they privately believe is catastrophic. The individual who absorbs an insult, swallows it whole and calls it keeping the peace. These aren't small things. These are daily surrenders. And they compound, quietly, invisibly, relentlessly, into a life lived at half volume. The world does not reward half volume, it punishes it. Because the world is not watching for your worth, it is watching for your weakness. And fear is a signal fire, visible to everyone who knows how to read it. Fear turns you into prey. This is not a metaphor. This is ancient hardwired animal instinct operating in modern offices, modern relationships, modern rooms. People detect fear the way predators detect a limp. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but reliably. And they press on it. They test the edges. They push a little further each time. They learn, through your responses, exactly what they can extract from you. Trembling deference doesn't invite compassion. It invites dominance. You don't earn empathy through weakness, you earn contempt. And here's the part that cuts deepest. Fear is a curriculum. Every time you shrink to avoid conflict, you are teaching people, in vivid, unambiguous detail, that your limits are negotiable, that your boundaries are suggestions, that if pushed hard enough, you will absorb almost anything to preserve the illusion of harmony. You are teaching people how to treat you, and most people, without ever realizing it, have been delivering all the wrong lessons for years. Machiavelli's most controversial insight wasn't about kings or conquest. It was about the fundamental architecture of two types of human beings. The man who waits for the world to be fair, and the man who proceeds as if it never will be. He contrasted what we might call the righteous man with what he termed virtue, and in Italian, that word carries none of the moral softness we attach to virtue. It means force, drive, the raw, unapologetic willingness to impose your will on circumstances rather than wait for circumstances to accommodate you. The righteous man plays by rules he didn't create. He waits his turn. He hopes that fairness is real, that merit is noticed, that patience is rewarded, that the universe keeps some kind of moral ledger. He reflects before acting. He deliberates before striking. He asks himself, is this the right thing to do? And while he's asking, the door closes. The moment passes. The opportunity collapses. And someone carrying fewer questions walks through the space he was still deciding whether to enter. Here is the brutal arithmetic of hesitation that nobody talks about. It is not just delay, it is transfer. Every moment you pause, someone else advances. Every moment you deliberate, someone else decides. You are not standing still. In a moving world, standing still is moving backwards. The effective man, what Machiavelli's critics flatten into ruthless, operates from a different premise entirely. He understands that the world is not governed by fairness. It never has been. It is governed by force, calculated, strategic, and frequently merciless force. Power is not a prize handed out for good behavior. It is a consequence of will pressed directly onto reality. It is taken, not waited for, not wished for, taken. And the ruthless act while the righteous reflect. The ruthless strike while the righteous deliberate. In that agonizing pause, in that gap of moral hesitation, opportunities don't wait politely. They vanish. Hesitation in the arena of power is not carefulness. It is a disease, and it is almost always fatal to ambition. Now, and this matters, Machiavelli's framework has real limits. He is describing a specific kind of power, competitive, high stakes, frequently zero-sum. Not every environment operates this way. Not every relationship is a battlefield. And history is absolutely littered with ruthlessly effective figures who ultimately collapsed under the weight of the enemies their methods created. Machiavelli himself warned against being hated, not merely feared. He understood that fear without respect is a match held to a powder keg. The explosion is only a matter of time. So the lesson is not to become ruthless. The lesson is, stop being naive about how power actually moves. So that when you choose how to operate, you choose from clarity, not from comfortable illusion. Not from the fairy tale that the good and patient and virtuous are quietly being noticed by a universe that will eventually make things right. Because that universe doesn't exist. Now let's talk about kindness, because this is where the deepest misreading happens, and where the most dangerous insight lives. Kindness is not the problem. Unanchored kindness is. There is a kindness that flows from genuine strength, from a person who is generous because they are secure, who is compassionate because they have nothing to prove and nothing to fear. That kindness carries extraordinary weight. It is respected and remembered precisely because everyone in the room understands, instinctively, that it is a choice. Then there is the other kindness. The kindness that is actually fear wearing a generous mask. The agreement that is really avoidance. The smile that exists to prevent conflict. The endless accommodation that is, at its core, a person terrified of what happens if they ever say no. People feel the difference, they always do, even when they can't articulate it, even when they'd never say it to your face. And fear-based kindness doesn't neutralize adversaries, it encourages them. Because it answers a question they were quietly, perpetually asking: what happens if I push? When the answer is nothing, when the answer is that you will absorb any insult, accommodate any demand, forgive any betrayal rather than endure the discomfort of confrontation, they file that information away with perfect precision, and they use it again and again and again. Machiavelli's point is not that you should be cruel. His point is colder and more precise than that. Kindness that cannot be distinguished from weakness accomplishes nothing. It protects no one. It earns nothing that lasts. It is not your generosity that people remember when it truly matters. It is how you responded, or failed to respond, when your limits were tested. True strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't perform. It is the quiet, immovable quality of someone who has already decided, long before any confrontation arrives, that certain lines will not be crossed, and that if they are, there will be consequences delivered without anger, without drama, without hesitation. That posture, not aggression but unambiguous resolve, is what earns lasting respect. And respect, as Machiavelli understood with cold precision, is the only durable foundation for anything that resembles lasting peace. Peace built through constant appeasement is not peace. It is a payment plan with no end date, and the installments keep rising. And now we reach the part most readers skim past. The part that makes everything else either possible or completely meaningless. Before you can refuse to fear others, you must conquer what is already destroying you from the inside. Because the most dangerous enemies are never external. They never were. They are your pride, which makes you overreach when patience would have won. Your insecurity, which makes you attack what you should simply ignore, handing your opponent a weapon made entirely from your own weakness. Your unmanaged anger, which is nothing more than proof to everyone watching that you can be manipulated with a single well-chosen word. Your desperation for approval, which makes you readable, predictable, and ultimately completely controllable. The man who has not mastered himself will always, always serve someone who has. Not because he is weaker in any physical sense, but because he is available. His buttons are exposed, his triggers are mapped, and someone, somewhere, is already using them. This is mechanical, in any room, in any negotiation, in any confrontation. Whoever is calmer controls the dynamic. Whoever is less desperate, less reactive, less emotionally naked holds the leverage. Not the loudest person, not the most aggressive, not the most credentialed, the calmest. Always. Self-mastery is not the suppression of emotion. It is not becoming cold or hollow. It is the disciplined, trained capacity to choose when to move and when to be still, when to speak and when silence is the sharpest instrument available. It means not flinching when someone expects you to flinch. It means not chasing bait when it's dangled directly in front of you. It means knowing, with the kind of certainty that cannot be shaken by opinion or pressure or temporary loss, exactly who you are and what you are built to withstand. So that when pressure arrives, and it will always arrive, you do not collapse into it. You do not perform for it. You do not react to prove something. You simply observe, you calculate, and when the moment is precisely right, you move. Real power does not rush. It does not need to prove itself in the moment. It does not care about winning the argument. It is concerned only with winning the outcome. And those two things are rarely the same. That clarity, that terrifying, quiet, immovable clarity, is not something you're born with. It is built, slowly, through the unglamorous, daily, entirely unwitnessed work of mastering your own responses when no one is watching and nothing is at stake. Because how you respond when nothing is at stake is exactly how you will respond when everything is. This is Machiavelli's deepest teaching, the one buried beneath 5 centuries of controversy and dismissal, and the comfortable, lazy labeling of him as simply evil. The first territory you must govern is not a company, not a room, not a relationship. It is yourself. Power begins where fear ends. Fear ends when you stop outsourcing your sense of safety to other people's opinions, reactions, and approval. When you stop performing for an audience that was never going to give you what you actually needed anyway. That is entirely, completely within your control. The question, the only question that has ever mattered, is whether you're willing to do what it actually takes. Most people aren't. Most people will watch this, feel something shift in their chest, and then return to exactly what they were doing before. And that's fine. The world needs those people too. But if something in this landed differently for you, if something cracked open rather than simply passing through, then you already know which category you're in. Now, genuinely, I want to hear from you. Not the polite kind of feedback, the real kind. Did this challenge something you believe? Did it go too far or not far enough? Is there a line here you think Machiavelli crossed that we should have pushed back on harder? Or do you think we went soft? That the real darkness runs deeper than what was said here? Because here's where I'll put something on the table directly. There is a legitimate argument that everything said here, the ruthlessness, the dismissal of moral hesitation, the suggestion that kindness without strength is weakness, is dangerous. That it is the philosophical scaffolding people use to justify cruelty, to rationalize exploitation, to dress up selfishness in the language of clarity. That argument deserves to be heard. There is an equally legitimate counter, that the dangerous idea is the alternative. That teaching people to be endlessly accommodating, to suppress instinct in favor of approval, to mistake passivity for virtue, is its own form of harm. A slower one, quieter, but no less real. So which is it? Is Machiavelli a mirror we desperately needed, or a permission slip we should never have opened? Drop it in the comments, argue it, push back, change someone's mind or let someone change yours. That is the only conversation worth having.